Imagine for a moment that you dedicated decades of your life mastering forces you believed were supreme. Imagine you invested the equivalent of $50,000 in mystical objects, ancestral rituals, and occult knowledge, passed down through generations. Now imagine that in a single night, a dream would change all of this forever. This is the true story of a traditional African witch, Doctor Who, in a supernatural encounter, impossible to ignore, came face to face with a presence that would transform not only his beliefs, but his entire existence. What happened that night challenged everything he knew about spiritual power, leading him to a radical decision that shocked his entire community. For over 20 years, this man was recognized as one of the most powerful healers in his region. His reputation extended for hundreds of miles. People traveled for days to consult his oracles, seek cures for impossible ailments, and request protection against evil forces. His home was a true museum of mystical artifacts, ancestral amulets, sacred bones, rare herbs, crystals, energized in lunar rituals, and objects imbued with what he believed to be absolute power. Each item in his collection represented years of dedication and significant financial investment. Ceremonial masks carved by master craftsmen, totems blessed by renowned shamans, rare ingredients imported from remote places around the world. His spiritual library was worth a fortune, but for him, the real value lay in the knowledge and power these objects represented. His days followed precise rituals established over decades. At dawn, he consulted spirits through games of sacred bones and shells. During the day, he attended 24 of people desperate for supernatural solutions to their problems. At night, he performed complex ceremonies, invoking entities he believed were his guides and protectors. His influence in the community was unquestionable. Local politicians consulted him before making important decisions. Merchants sought his blessings to prosper in business. Entire families depended on his spiritual guidance to resolve conflicts and protect their homes. He wasn't just a healer, he was a living institution, a link between the visible world and the invisible forces that governed existence. On an apparently ordinary Tuesday, after a particularly intense day of consultations and rituals, the witch doctor retired to rest. That night, however, something extraordinary would happen. In his dreams, he found himself in a place he couldn't identify, a luminous space, different from any spiritual vision he had ever experienced. It was then that a presence manifested itself. It wasn't like the spirits he was accustomed to communicating with. This presence radiated such intense light and love that he felt simultaneously welcomed and confronted. The figure that appeared before him had unmistakable characteristics: the marks of nails in his hands and feet, an expression of infinite compassion, and a spiritual authority that transcended everything he knew. Jesus, for it was he who presented himself in the dream, did not come with judgment, but with revelation. He showed the witch doctor the true nature of the forces he had worked with for decades. He revealed that all the power he thought he possessed was, in reality, an illusion that kept him prisoner. The spirits he invoked were not his allies, but entities that fed off his energy and the energy of those who sought his help. During this revelation, the witch doctor experienced something he had never felt: a deep and genuine peace. For the first time in his adult life, he felt no fear, no anxiety, no constant need to prove his power. It was as if an invisible weight had been removed from his shoulders. Jesus showed him that there was a different path, based not on dominion over occult forces, but on submission to divine love. When he awoke the witch doctor knew that his life had changed forever. The dream had not been just a nighttime experience. It had been a transformative encounter with a superior reality. Over the following days, he struggled with the implications of this revelation. Accepting Jesus would mean abandoning everything he had built over decades. It would mean disappointing hundreds of people who depended on him and giving up a substantial source of income. But the peace he had experienced in the dream did not abandon him. On the contrary, it grew each day, contrasting dramatically with the restlessness he felt when he tried to resume his old practices. It was as if he had tasted pure water after years of drinking salt water. He could no longer be satisfied with what he previously considered sufficient. The final decision came on a Saturday morning. The witch doctor gathered all his mystical artifacts in his backyard. They were decades of collection, representing an investment of approximately $50,000, a fortune in his community. Ceremonial masks that had been passed down from generation to generation, extremely rare amulets, handwritten witchcraft books, crystals energized in complex rituals, sacred herbs, difficult to obtain. One by one, he threw each item into the bonfire he had prepared. The flames consumed not just material objects, but symbols of power, status, and identity he had cultivated throughout his adult life. Neighbors and clients gathered around, some crying, others expressing indignation, many simply perplexed at this surreal scene. What happened in the following months surprised everyone. Far from becoming impoverished or diminished, the former witch doctor found a new way to serve his community. He began to share his experience with Jesus, not as a traditional preacher, but as someone who had personally experienced the difference between genuine and illusory power. His house, once filled with mystical artifacts, became a place of prayer and counseling based on Christian principles. People continued to seek him out, but now for different reasons. Instead of magical solutions to their problems, they found wise guidance, genuine hope, and above all, the same peace that had transformed their counselor's life. Months after his conversion, the former witch doctor reflected on his journey. He realized that for decades, he had sought power through control over spirits, over circumstances, over people's destinies. But true power, Adis came from surrender. Surrendering to Christ's love had given him more genuine spiritual authority than any ritual or amulet had ever provided. His prayers had real power. His words brought emotional healing. His presence transmitted the same peace he had experienced in that transformative dream. He no longer needed external objects to mediate his connection with the divine. This connection had become direct, personal, and unbreakable. The witch doctor's transformation sent shockwaves throughout the entire region. Other magic practitioners began to question their own beliefs and practices. Some people, initially skeptical, began to notice genuine changes in the life of the man they once feared and respected for his occult power, and now respected for his wisdom and compassion. His story spread beyond the borders of his community, inspiring others in similar situations to consider a new perspective on spirituality and power. It was no longer about dominating invisible forces, but about being transformed by a force greater than any magic, the unconditional love of Christ. This story reminds us that no matter how deeply we are involved in practices we consider powerful, there is always the possibility of radical transformation. The encounter with Jesus can happen in the most unexpected moments, through the most unlikely means. But when it happens, nothing remains the same. If you find yourself on a spiritual journey, seeking power, purpose, or peace, remember this story. Sometimes the greatest act of power is having the courage to abandon what we thought was our source of strength, to discover an infinitely greater source. Leave your thoughts about this extraordinary story in the comments below. If it touched your heart in any way, consider subscribing to the channel for more stories that can transform your perspective on faith and spirituality. And don't forget to like this video if it added value to your personal journey.